So Katie is going to start, and we're each going to take about 8 minutes to share our case studies. And then we're going to ask you to talk amongst yourselves in your tables, and we'll give you the topics for conversation when we do that. We're not going to have a lot of time to report out, but we will ask for 1 or 2, 3 of you to give some of your profound thoughts, so just giving you warning now. And the session will conclude at about 11:15. Do you have a clicker? Excellent.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Katie Jones, and I'm a consultant at the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. And today I would like to share some compelling cases from UIL's online capacity building course titled Skill Sets in Transit, Recognizing Prior Learning for Migrants and Refugees. And in doing so, we will explore what can support the development of truly inclusive RVA policies in different contexts. So, hosted last year, the pilot edition of our online course targeted national-level policymakers working in the field of lifelong learning and skills development, along with recognition, validation, and accreditation practitioners. 39 learners from 13 countries signed up, and these included Mongolia, Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, and many other countries as well. So the course really aimed to enable participants to strengthen RVA systems in their countries through building competences to develop and implement policies and practices that are inclusive of both migrants and refugees. And it sought to do so through providing case studies from UIL's research projects on this topic, along with facilitating enriching dialogue between different countries. So ultimately, the course sought to equip participants to advance inclusive national-level policy approaches, accessible assessment practices, and effective outreach by sharing guidance on how to implement 17 key success factors in quite a broad sense. So legislative cohesion, evidence-based policymaking, and multi-stakeholder collaboration, all featured among other elements. Now, via the UIL Learning Hub platform, our learners were able to engage with a really wide variety of learning resources to unpack these success factors. And this included videos from experts across the globe, many of whom are in this room today. Our participants also greatly benefited from insights and feedback shared by our team of expert facilitators that included Nan Travers, Andrina Wafer, Alan Mandel, and Manuel Sutuotero. On the flip side, however, we all collectively learned so much from our learners. So overall, the pilot edition of our course was quite a great success, receiving a 100% satisfaction rating in a post-course evaluation survey that was shared with our students, and many positive testimonies were also received. However, what really stayed with myself and UIL program specialist Marie McCauley, who co-coordinated the course, was just how our students have been able to apply what they discovered to strengthen accessible RVA systems and policy in their countries in light of very distinct contextual challenges. They have illustrated how scaling up RVA can be possible, and they have acted as champions of inclusion. So today, for the purpose of this event, we've invited 2 of the course's learners to present the challenges their countries face when it comes to RVA for migrants and refugees. And we also asked them to share their perspectives on what can make for inclusive policy based on their own efforts to make this a reality since the course ended. So first of all, we will hear from Nene Jieji at the National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education in Nigeria. As we learned from our students, in Nigeria, there are a host of promising practices and effective efforts in place to promote inclusive RVA. However, there is no current national level policy there to advance this at the moment. And also creating synergy between different groups of stakeholders working in this area is also providing quite a challenge. So let us now hear from Nena on what she has to say. Please, can you play the video? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ejeji Nena Jen, speaking from Nigeria National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education. It's a privilege to be here speaking on the Nigerian experiences with regards to recognition of prior learning. The challenges faced by migrants and refugees in Nigeria are not far different from what obtains in other countries. We have the challenge of lack of information. There is a language barrier. There is a lack of qualified assessors, financial barriers, especially when they want to go back to school. There are the problem of remote location of camps where these migrants and refugees stay. And then to have an inclusive RVA policy, it should be a policy that should be able to take care of most of these challenges I've mentioned and even more, so that every migrant, every refugee should have access. And then on the concrete moves I have made to incorporate RPL in Nigeria, as an individual I can't do a lot, but using the platform of my organization, I was nominated to be a part of National Technical Skills Committee, and there in the validation meetings I was able to make sure that RPL is part and parcel of the framework. Also, right now the minister has invited us to use the framework to formulate a national policy on skills. I'm happy I'm part of that too. I'll keep speaking up. And then in my organization, we are reviewing our policy guidelines. This is being sponsored by UNESCO, and also I'm part of it, and I've spoken up on the inclusion of not only RPL, but also lifelong learning. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So it's been truly inspiring to see how, since the course ended, Nena has been able to advocate for the importance of RPL in the national level policy guidelines she mentioned. Nena's experience really does speak to how RVA that is inclusive of both migrants and refugees can be advanced through strategic policy approaches that build on existing efforts to promote lifelong learning. Beyond advancing RVA for migrants and refugees, this may also help to address some of the consequences of internal displacement that Nigeria is currently facing. Now, we also invited another of our learners, Catherine Wanjiru-Mena, an RPL advisor at the Toolkit for Skills and Innovation, to intervene today in person. Unfortunately, Catherine was unable to make it, but with her consent, I would like to share with you some remarks that she shared with us on her behalf. So just for context, in Kenya, there is a national level RPL policy framework in place, and a multi-sectoral approach is being advanced to really promote this. However, the country does face its own share of challenges. And Catherine, since completing the course, has really sought to address these from the bottom up through advancing quite a range of very specific initiatives to support distinct groups of migrants and refugees in their access to and completion of RPL in particular. So Catherine said, "My initiative aims to dig deeper into connecting the dots between skills recognition and validation policies. It is in this context that I have developed a program on skills recognition for domestic care workers, targeting women migrants who are keen to obtain employment outside the country and urban refugees who have prior experiences in child and elderly care. For me, it's about empowerment for thousands of women who would like to obtain dignified employment opportunities but are not able due to a lack of effective skills recognition systems. For me, what can contribute to inclusive VPL policy is government buy-in when the government fully understands the policy and fully supports it. For example, in Kenya, the country's RPL policy was officially launched on the 22nd of March earlier this year, and the Deputy President, who was present, said in his remarks, he referred to the target group I've been working with, domestic care workers. So I think Catherine's experience really does speak to how when we combine a top-down approach with bottom-up efforts, the results can truly be magical. So thank you so much, all of you, for your attention today. I would also like to take this opportunity to just say very quickly a huge thank you to all of those of you who contributed to our online course, whether that was through contributing to the research behind it, submitting videos, participating in live sessions, or providing feedback. Your collaboration on this has been truly appreciated, both by UIL and our learners. Thank you.
So, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everyone here in the room. I am a VPL Biennale veteran, so I'm happy to be able to contribute to also this Biennale. And my name is Anna Kahlson, and I work at the Swedish National Agency for Higher Vocational Education. That's the longest name of an agency in history of time, but I'm getting really good at saying it. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about a piloting of an integrated VPL-based learning pathway towards a higher vocational qualification in Sweden. And we were also part of the course, so I have to say thank you for letting us be part of your course. We were happy to contribute with that. And I also wanted to say before I start, some of you people have talked about evidence, I have evidence, at least some. First of all, I have to say a little bit about what higher vocational education in Sweden is. It's post-secondary or tertiary vocational education based on labor market demand for skills. And it leads to qualifications or degrees on EQF levels 5 and 6. And the fact that it's based on actual needs for skill in the labor market is a key success factor in this system because programs vary over time depending on what the actual needs are in the labor market. And I wanted to share some numbers for you. At the moment, there are annually about 85,000 students enrolled in these programs, which is about 1/4 of all tertiary education students in Sweden. We know that 9 out of 10 students within the HVE programs are employed within a year from graduation. And the programs themselves are normally 1 to 3 years in length. On average, most of them are actually 2 years. We have talked a little bit about inclusion and so on, so I also wanted to let you know that when the system started in 2009, the right to have both access and exemptions based on your prior learning or the recognition of prior learning has been regulated within the system. And although I'm going to talk more about the exemption part today, I wanted to also tell you that about 14% of students enrolled in these programs are gaining access through recognition of prior learning. The pilot that we were tasked by the government to conduct started just when the pandemic actually started, so in 2020. And maybe that was a key factor for the timing to actually have success with this. But we got the task to conduct a 3-year pilot to create, as we said, a faster and more flexible pathway towards the degree or the qualification, to create something that could be permanently integrated into the system, which it now is. So I'd say it was a successful pilot in that regards, that we now have this pathway in the system. What we did, and what's important to know to understand the model, is that we did not change any regulations, but we changed the funding model. All education in Sweden is actually free of charge for individuals. It's state-financed, and the financing for HV in Sweden is a state grant that we as an agency are responsible for handing out to the providers of the programs that are approved in the system. And what we did is that we changed the way we pay for the provision to the providers with the state grant to make sure that we pay for the validation. And as you see in this picture here, it starts, of course, with you being enrolled, because that's when the right of exemption actually kicks in, when you as a student enrolled in the program. We started with a validation process that leads to an exemption, and the exemption can be both for full or parts of courses. Based on that result, the student then gets an individual study plan for the complementary training that perhaps is needed to actually reach the full degree. So that's the steps in the system. It's interesting to share some of the results on this with you. On average, students enrolled in IH Flex or HV Flex, they got 45% of their programs exempted. That's quite a lot, so it's almost half of programs on average. 8 out of 10 of the students that have graduated through this pathway did so faster than they would have if they followed the normal program pathway. And when we talk about faster, it's kind of difficult measuring exactly how much faster. Do you measure that in hours or minutes or days or whatever? But if we look at the students that we have talked to, it's some of them even more, but many of them actually cut their learning time in half. So if it was a 2-year program, through this pathway, you complete that 2-year program in half of the time, so 1 year. Another interesting thing in this is that the most common base for the recognition of prior learning, for the exemption, is actually skills developed through work-life experience. And last, but definitely not least, we saved approximately also 45% of the state grant by doing this way. So we jokingly say that we can train 2 for 1. And I think this is one of the most important results in this, that we actually could follow the money through the system. So I wanted to then say something about what we've actually learned through this, and I've had a very hard time choosing on what to focus on. And I think there are many other things here, but I think these are the most important parts. And I think based on the discussions that we've had here these days, the first point is really, really important, because for validation to really be working, it needs to be integrated in our systems for education and training. It should be a natural part of providing education and training, not something extra or something on the side. And I think this is something that we kind of knew and wanted to achieve going into this, but it's very obvious that it also works. And we've talked a little bit about putting individuals in the center here, and I just want to share maybe a provocative thought with all of you today. Maybe we need to start putting systems in the center for VPL to become a real opportunity for people. We need to build systems that works for this. And that leads into the second point, that what we also see in HV Flex is that the offer of validation combined with a guaranteed complementary training towards the full degree is also a success factor. So as an individual going in, you need to know that irregardless of how much of the program I will have exempted, I need to know from the beginning that I will also be able to get that training I need to reach the final destination, let's say. And last but not least, funding. Money talks, you get what you pay for. So if we want systems where validation is used, where validation is becoming a real opportunity for individuals, you need to make sure that you have funding that supports that. So, thank you very much.
I'm going to stand up because the lights are bright and in my eyes. Colleen, I want to thank you for bringing the medicine for us today and for helping us start with an open heart and an open mind. I'm about to show an image which is going to be triggering for some. By that I mean it might be emotional, so please look away if you needed to. I'm going to share a very brief history of colonization in Canada. For hundreds of years, Canada has been walking a very destructive and depowering path. Feelings and actions of superiority and the colonizers' ways of knowing and learning. Many believed that they were superior and must be adopted by all. We labeled this in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as cultural genocide. And I know those are strong words. I'm going to talk a little bit about truth and reconciliation in a minute, but first I want to talk about that image in front of you. This is a painting by the Cree artist Kent Monk, done in 2017. What you're seeing is his representation of colonization, loss, and resilience. He's captured the residential school experiences, the 60s scoop, and the child welfare system of today. The residential school systems were started in the 1800s, and they forcibly removed Indigenous children from their homes, their families, their communities. They brought them into, and I will do the air quotes, into the schools to educate them. Educates in air quotes as well. The education consisted of taking away their language, taking away their ways of knowing, taking away their ways of being. Told them that they were less than, told them they didn't belong in society, and thus they adopted the colonized ways. There's so much more I can say about this, but I think that's enough. In 2008, the federal government started what we call the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They interviewed over 6,000 survivors of the residential schools, asking for their stories. the Truth and Reconciliation Commission concluded with 94 calls to action centered around 5 principles: truth, justice, memory, reparation, and recognition. So you may be wondering, what does any of that have to do with prior learning assessment? In prior learning assessment at Thompson Rivers University, we were following these colonized ways. We were telling students what to put in their portfolios, how to put it in their portfolios, what learning was most valued, and we were assessing it based on our understanding. We knew we weren't doing well. We knew we needed to do better. And those of you who had the opportunity to hear Nick and Geraldine talk yesterday, Geraldine's an Indigenous woman from Kahlson in British Columbia, and she talked about how that traumatized her. So we needed to do better. How did we do this? And Julie, this is getting to your point from this morning. We started having conversations. We started talking to Indigenous peoples, educators, to the communities, and we had dozens and dozens of meetings, conversations, meals, trying to understand what were we doing wrong, how did we need to do it better, how did we need to shift our ways of knowing and understanding. What we learned, and this is so far because we're still on a learning journey, is that Indigenous ways of knowing are diverse. It depends on the community that you're working with. They vary greatly depending on the communities, but there are some commonalities around the learning from the land. A very different perspective in terms of, I grew up thinking that we were there to control the land and to take the resources from it. Indigenous peoples have known better all along, and that we are here to work with the land, protect it. Their oral traditions, their ability to observe, to learn through experience, the interconnectedness, the holistic nature of their learning, the respect for their elders, for their community. How do they learn? It's place-based, it's experiential, it's holistic, it's cumulative, it is intergenerational, it is dynamic, and it is nonlinear. Very different from what we were doing with PLAR, which was very linear, very compartmentalized, very narrow. So the ways of knowing are culturally responsive. You design authentic assessment. This point here, I don't want to stumble over it because this is probably the most important piece here. Back to, where are the users in this? How are we student-centered? We can't tell them what knowledge is. We can't tell them how to surface that knowledge. We can't tell them how to reflect on it. This isn't our way of knowing. We need to work with communities. We need to work with the elders, the knowledge keepers, the matriarchs, the students, in a very holistic way to learn from them, to take a look at, what do we need to know? How do we need to know it? How do we need to do it? So we've been very privileged, very blessed to receive funding of 800,000 Canadian dollars to work with 3 Indigenous communities. We're working with Kamloops, Kahlson, and Asketum, working with their knowledge keepers, their elders, their matriarchs, their students, to learn, how do we do better? How do we help them surface their learning, reflect on it, share that learning back to us? And really importantly, how do we assess that? Because even how we're assessing it isn't working. It is assuming that we know best, and we don't. So together, we're creating a new path that cultivates inclusion, cultivates a sense of understanding, shared understanding, a sense of belonging, I hope. We want to share, we want to entrust that power, that agency, and to move forward with an open heart and an open mind. We can't do that on our own. We have to do that with community, by braiding and walking a new path. Thank you. I'm going to be provocative. I'm going to put it back on that picture. What we would like to do now, in the next 10 minutes, is we'd like you and your tables to talk about the work that you're doing, the experiences you have, the knowledge you hold. We want you to talk about 2 things, and, sorry, I forgot we had this slide. How can policy impact exclusion and inclusion? Who identifies what knowledge is valued, and how is it assessed? So in your tables, we invite you to have those conversations. We're going to give you 7 minutes, and I know that's precise. And then we'll have roving mics in the audience, 2 or 3 really thought-provoking comments that you want the rest of the group to know. So your 7 minutes start now. Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay, it's time for us to come back together now. We've got a roving mic, but thanks, Dallas. It is very difficult to stand here and to ask you to stop talking. I imagine the conversations are very rich, very detailed, and that you're greatly enjoying it. To wrap up this session, I'm going to ask Thank you. Thank you. They weren't hearing me in the back of the room. It is very difficult to stand here and to end these conversations. We do have some very engaging conversations yet to come. And we do have a roving mic in the audience. We have time. We have 5 minutes left. And I didn't want us to leave this session without 1 or 2 really thought-provoking, really strong comments. And I know I'm asking for a lot here. Anybody in their table that had a comment that was really profound that you think the rest of the room should know? Okay, I'm hearing there's a lot of them. How do you decide? Okay, thank you. Iceland.
Yes, hi. I'll do it. Well, we were discussing, we started with discussing that even though policy wants the best for all, it can sometimes become exclusive because it defines something in a very broad way. So it becomes something for the stronger ones who have education and know how to go after more, but not for the other population that doesn't have a similar access to those measures, or there are not measures. And we were talking about variable and coherent processes, so that needs to go hand in hand, and that the value of results needs to be defined in a context, because you really raised, it has been raised here at the conference, that what is evidence, the question of what is evidence, and we certainly struggle with this in Iceland when we're measuring, like, what are we supposed to achieve in adult learning? Can it be always measured that you have to go have finished upper secondary school level to have achieved something? And what's then the accountability for us that are working in the field? As the Education Training Service Centre is a coordinating body for the lifelong learning centres in the regions of Iceland. And what makes us accountable? And how do we measure that, like in guidance? How do we measure the impact of guidance? So, yes, a lot of things, but I'm not going to, but specifically that sometimes we mean well, but it becomes something else.
Thank you. Thank you.
She didn't introduce herself, but this is Fjola from Iceland.
Yeah. And we have one more comment over here. Did I see, we might have time for one more hand. Was that you, Diego? Okay, thanks.
Hello, my name is Deirdre Nugent. I work in CCT College in Dublin. So we were discussing what the presentation you had given on the decolonisation of education, and we have an Australian colleague with us on the table who was discussing engaging with Indigenous populations in Australia and frameworks and policies and strategies. I feel like I've actually gone to Canada. There seems to be a huge number of Canadians, and lots of the educational organisations in Canada have again discussed their engagement with their Indigenous communities. And they seem to have very specific frameworks, specific strategies for those communities. So I think it's important for our Irish colleagues, for me, for all our Irish colleagues, to remember our travelling community, and that they have the same issues that a lot is coming up with Indigenous communities in other countries from our colleagues. So hopefully this is a really good opportunity for me as an Irish person who works in the education system, and for our Irish colleagues to look at what is being done with these communities in other countries and maybe take that learning and apply it to our travelling community.
Thank you. The last comment goes to you, Diego.
So, hello again. I just wanted to share, in regards to the second question, who identifies what knowledge is valued and how it is assessed, and what we were talking here, I wanted to share what I consider a very valuable practice in Mexico's competency certification, that is, the individuals themselves are the ones who identify what knowledge is. So, for example, now that we're starting to work with Indigenous people in certifying for traditional Mexican cuisine or craftsmanship, they themselves have the expertise, so they tell us what should be in the competency standard. Conocer only gives them the methodology so they can develop the competency standard, what it should contain, but the expertise, the knowledge is there. So they themselves, the experts, tell us what should be recognized. So I just wanted to share that practice.
Thank you. Okay, they got me. I didn't want to have two mics going. Thank you very much. Thank you for being on our panel. I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversations today.